on macro Mondays. Last week was a big one. This week, not so much, but obviously the market has to digest what happened last week, and there is some speculation that's kind of persisted around Iran, and kind of explain some things we're going to talk about today too. So last week, I think the big story was around a couple of things, a more hawkish tilt and inflation, kind of more PCE hotter than expected. Um, Growth not as strong as we had anticipated, but has some context around why that might be in terms of the government. And then the Supreme Court coming out and shutting down those tariffs. And what we've seen since is really Trump ignoring them and making a statement to that effect. Ultimately, the S&P was actually up 1.32%, and yeah, modest PMI in terms of expansion. So that's kind of last week. And then this week it's PPI, consumer confidence, which has been, constantly quite low, durable goods, global inflation and growth pulse, and then some Fed speakers throughout the week talking about what's going on last week. So this week's not too interested in the economic event side, but I think last week there's a lot for the market to digest. And we saw that in different assets moving from there. So if we take a look at gold had a pretty good week last week as investors kind of go towards safety. We've seen better performance in basically long duration rates coming down since the start of Fed. But yeah, into last week, we kind of have seen that take a pause and the momentum slow down a bit. The S&P 500 having 3 weeks in a row of a gap down, which means that, from the close on Friday and the open, there's a gap down. So that does show that for the last 3 weeks, information over the weekend, digesting what's going on in the market, there's definitely uncertainty in the market. And you can get this indicator by searching for weekend percentage gap, and you'll be able to find that on TradingView. But yeah, I mean, really what it's saying is that markets are uncertain, I would say right now. And, we're not kind of pushing away to all-time highs, at least from last week. But, the market has remained buoyant, as have semiconductors, right? So semiconductors still close to that all-time high. We have some really important earnings this week, including Nvidia, so we'll get to that in a moment. Yeah, I mean, similar to the rate story of last week is that we've seen obviously the US dollar getting stronger again, and then towards the end of the week it slowed down. So, we're still in this long-term kind of upward trend of the kind of New Zealand dollar weakness. And it's the US dollar started to get stronger again last week, and then it's taking a pause. And then lastly, out of the kind of more technical charts, just Bitcoin price action. It was a 51% drop or almost 52% drop from high to low, this low down here on February 6th. And then since then, consolidating at the current levels. And we've got some interesting data coming out of the COT report. So this is the Commitment of Traders report. Again, you can get that by going to cot.eccuity.com. And if we start off with Bitcoin for the Commitment of Traders report, you've got large speculators getting real long here. And on a relative basis, commercials are real short. Quite interesting, I think, but I still don't know what to make of this whole Commitment of Traders report in the Bitcoin world. So let's move on to the S&P. Actually, I would like to look at oil as well. So I'll start off with crude. More and more contracts. So the open interest is rising. Large speculators and retail also getting longer oil. Commercials are tending to trend more short. Makes sense if there's obviously lots of retail and large speculators going long. There needs to be someone on the other side of that trade, and I guess that's the commercials in this case. And then if we move on to the S&P 500. You've got commercials, you've got, large speculators extremely short here. The open interest is down. It's not too high at the moment relative to other kind of options expiries, which you can see around these different dates here. June, September, December. These are big expiry kind of periods. End of March. So anyway, I think it's quite interesting here, given all of the negative news, to see commercials net exposed on the long side, and quite a bit too. And then, really, lastly, we were just going to look at the old treasuries, 30-year. There's obviously so much you can look at here. Um, yeah, I mean, consistent to the open interest is going with the price action. I think there's a lot of people that have been talking around how the US is going to intend to try and suppress interest rates, similar to, I guess, how Japan has. Uh, the long duration treasuries have come down so much and had such a ferocious drawdown that I think a lot of investors are looking to kind of pick this out of the bottom of the barrel. So I think that there's this tension between kind of natural interest rates and kind of what the true price should be to borrow long term from the US's perspective, and then what market participants want to see, and where there are a lot of incentives to try and make things happen. So yeah, not too much going on here overall, I guess. Now there is a lot of earnings this week. Some pretty important ones too. So over the last week, the S&P was up 1.34, as mentioned before. Get rid of that. And these are all the earnings players of the week that I found interesting and will be looking along for. Duolingo. So there's just a lot of big reports this week. Dell, Nvidia, I think CoreWeave as well, and Hewlett Packard. You got Home Depot and Lowe's, just for seeing how kind of that space is going, and then you got a bunch of software companies as well, like Salesforce, Intuit, Duolingo, Snowflake. Some of the more speculative names like Rocket Lab, the quantum computing company IonQ, and Block as well is an interesting one, which is got a lot of discussion around the market cap versus what they paid for Afterpay. So though it's going to be a big week. Starting off with Domino's too. So over the last little while, let's say the last month, what can we see? It's obviously not going to put all the names on there, but Dell's had an okay month. Nvidia's holding up over the last month, and Lowe's of the best performers over the last month period. But then Hims and Hers, IONQ, Intuit, SoundHound, and Duolingo all down between 47 and 24%. So it really does highlight how the smaller, more speculative side of the market that has performed really well over the last couple of years has taken a considerable hit, especially as the view around who are the real winners and where's the value actually going to be kept in this kind of race of AI. That is obviously being questioned all the time. So you imagine a company like SoundHound, which is potentially easily going to be able to be disrupted by some of the foundation models and businesses that are actually building these models. So you can see these guys were as high as like $20 odd. Now they're back down to 7. So yeah, it's been a rough one. So quite an interesting week for earnings. And yeah, we will be back next week with a following episode of Macro Monday. Hope you have a good one. Make sure to stay rational and just enjoy the events as they